Good morning and welcome to CSL Denver, a place, a space, and a face of love, a spiritual community teaching ancient principles and utilizing universal wisdom to enrich our lives and the lives of others and to raise our vibrations to the level of the divine. I thank you so much, Gary, for that Love Covers Me song because today we need love more than anything else. I think it's very apparent given what we see going on in the world. And so I thank you for that song. Now, as Rumi said, today we're going to continue with this whole theme of playing with the paradoxes. And I'll tell you, we got a lot of paradoxes going on right now that we need to pay attention to. And the way we do that is by what we are doing for the topic today, which is challenging your worldview. Challenging your worldview. Now, the question becomes right off the bat, well, what is a worldview? And if I'm going to challenge it, I need to know what it is. I need to understand it. I need to know what I'm working with, as they say. And so a worldview is a collection of attitudes, beliefs, values, expectations about how the world works and how I experience the world. Now, we've all had worldview changes because I used to believe in the fairy, tooth fairy, and Easter bunny, and that was a whole worldview. Sometimes I wanted to take my tooth out just so I could get that cord under my pillow. But then I learned that it was my dad putting that cord under the pillow, and my whole worldview changed. It changed. And so in some ways, worldview is like a pair of sunglasses. It filters what we see. And because we, especially in Colorado, I mean, if you don't have sunshades in Colorado, you're in trouble because sun is everywhere all the time. But there's so many different sunshades, different shades of colors and Blu-ray and reflecting and all kinds of things. And so you can easily begin to see if we're looking through the world with these different lenses, how we get things distorted, how we don't quite see what we see, or we don't see what we think we see. And so this whole thing starts from birth. So imagine you growing up out west or in the Midwest or in the Northeast or in the South. The whole culture, the whole language of how you navigate life is different. If you're in California, your navigation might be a surfboard every morning. If you're in the Northeast, you might be going to a park. If it's in Colorado, it might be, let's go climb a 14er. Each one of those puts a different mindset. If you're surfing, your mindset is I can conquer the wave. If you're climbing the mountain, I can withstand the altitude. I ain't gonna fall out. I hope the weather don't change too much when I get to the top of it. And so when we look around now, we see these exact conditions in everything in our life. We look at what's going on in Israel and Palestine. A worldview needs to change. We've had war upon war upon war as a worldview, and nothing has benefited from it. They keep happening. So it's very obvious that we need to change our worldview. Same thing with climate change or global warming, or call it what you want, but the weather ain't what it used to be. And if we continue on this path, I dare say that we won't like what the end of the road brings. So it's imperative that we challenge our worldview. It's imperative. And now it's not easy. right? Because we've built our whole life on this worldview. I'm a this, I'm a that. I go to this school, I went to that school, I'm from this family, I got that much money or things. That's a worldview. That creates how you act, how you respond, what questions you ask, what things you dismiss. And at this moment in time, we can't dismiss anything. Everything has to be considered because the cost, dare I say, is your life. That is the cost of not changing a worldview. And so when we look around the world, it should be obvious. It should be obvious that we need to change not only globally, but individually, right? Because it starts local. It says, think global, but you got to act local. That means you got to start acting with you. You got to start changing your ways of thinking, your ways of view. And if you don't, you know, we got that great saying, if you want to keep getting what you're getting, keep doing what you're doing. It won't change. So the worldview has to change. The worldview has to change. And the good thing about the changing of the worldview, it gives us an opportunity for self-reflection, for introspection. How many people, you know, like waking up at night, stomping their toe on the bed when you're trying to get some water or go to the bathroom? You can change that worldview by moving the night table. It's not that hard. Just move it over. The same thing that we need to do in our life. Some of these things we have in our lives, some of these things that we value, some of these things that we believe in, they need to be moved because they're no longer serving us. They're no longer true. At one time, there was a belief that the earth was flat. Can you believe that? That the earth was flat. And then if we got too close to the edge, we would just fall off. Now, I don't know where we would fall or where they thought we would fall, but they thought that. And there's a group that's still around today called the Flat Earth. There's a Flat Earth group right now. That worldview doesn't work, really. I mean, we've sent enough satellites and astronauts and people into space, and we know we are a big blue marble floating in triple darkness. So the flat earth theory or the flat earth worldview is not serving us. And so if we could bring up this first slide, it says, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. We see them as we are. So if we don't like what we're seeing, then we need to figure out, what am I seeing with? You know, what am I thinking about? What am I looking for? Because it's not going to change until we change from that perspective. From that perspective, we have to begin to say, why do I like coffee with cream? And so likes it black. Now, there's nothing wrong with either one. Both are valid, but you need to understand why. Because if you don't, I got a bridge I'm going to sell you in Brooklyn. I'm going to get a lot of money for it, and you're not going to have nothing when it's all over but some anger because the worldview was not proper. It was not in the right place. And so when we begin to think about worldview, the first thing that we have to remember is that the essence of all things are unseen. Now, that may take a moment to think about, but the essence of all things are unseen. I don't think there's one thing on the planet that if I got down to the essence of it, you could point it out per se as a visible thing. So I like to tell you this story to really hone that in. So there was this wise father. He only had a first grade education. And he sent his son to the best schools. And his son went to the best school, and he came back with all the letters behind his name, and he thought he was, you know, the cat's meow, as they say. And he was asking his father these questions, and his father says, I spent all that money and sent you to school, and looked like it was a waste. You can't understand nothing. And he said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, let me tell you some wisdom. He says, I want you to go out there and get that pomegranate off the pomegranate tree. And he said, okay. So he went and got the pomegranate. He said, I cut it in half. He cut it in half. He said, what's in there? He said, pomegranate seeds. He said, okay. Take one of them seeds and open the seed up. What do you see? Nothing. But you say, okay, take another one. Open that other one. What's in there? Nothing. He said, well, now ain't that strange? He says, you done took it and brought it down to the seed and you don't see anything. Yet, if I plant that seed, it'll create a whole nother pomegranate tree with lots of pomegranates. So the essence of the thing, you are judging, you got all these degrees, you got all these letters, you're judging things by some literal description of it, but the essence of it, you don't even see it. That's what we have to deal with in life every day. And so our worldview has to change, because we've got a worldview based on something we've seen. Not that that doesn't count, but it's not the essence. And the essence is revealed. When I plant the seed, it becomes revealed over time. And that thing that I thought was nothing now is something. And so we can get that next slide that kind of breaks it down. This is from Romans 1:20. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. Saying we have the essence within us. There is no excuse to say we don't know. There is no excuse to say we don't understand. We can't change. We can't fix these problems that we're faced with. Because God said, I have put that in you from the beginning. Not only in you, in everything else. So there's no excuse for us to look at the conditions of the world and say, I'm going to pray for it. Not that prayer is not needed. But we have to do more than prayer today. We have to do more. We have to have some actions. Whether that actions is to change my life or to help somebody else change their life or just to cheer somebody on who's changing their life. We all have to get into the game at different levels. But we have to begin to change the way we view the world. Or the consequences will be we won't have a world. We won't have a world. And then I bet you they'll come up with some good excuses then, right? They go, you talk about some excuses. They're going to just roll off the tongue. And so when we begin to think about how we change our worldview, there are three things I want to share that will give us a good footing to do this. A good footing to do this. And the first one is the proverbial question. Who are you becoming? Who are you becoming? It's the first thing that you need to look at when you want to change your worldview. Am I stuck in my old habits, my old beliefs? Or do I ask the question, why do I value what I value? What makes that valuable to me? Because that helps you understand what you are becoming. What do you value? What's driving me? What's the energy? What's the impetus for me to do the things I do? That'll give you a good indication of who you're becoming or who you're not becoming. But either way, we're becoming something. And so we need to understand, who are we becoming? We have to ask these questions of ourselves. Do I look at a bad situation and say, oh, that's awful. Oh, that's awful. But I don't do it. I don't do anything about it. And that don't mean you have to physically. You might just have a conversation about what's next. You might have a conversation. Can we get some spare parts or some clothes or whatever and put to a situation or put to a problem that needs some attention? We're no longer in a time where we can just sit back and analyze. Them days are gone. Analysis paralysis, we have that to the nth degree. We analyze everything. When you go home this evening, or if you get home early enough in the morning, turn on the TV, you're going to see all kinds of programs with analysis of what's going on over in the Middle East. Tons of them, from every point of view. But people are still dying. And we're worried about who got the most ratings analyzing a problem that calls for action. So we have to ask ourselves, really, who are we becoming? Are we becoming someone who just likes to pontificate about things? Or are we really trying to be what we say we stand for, and that is a change in the world, to create a world that works for all? And when we can honestly say that, then we're doing something. If I get that next slide, it kind of helps bring it home. This is Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. You got to challenge yourself. Conform your mind, change your mind. That's what that verse means. What is your worldview? You have to change your worldview. Be not conformed to the stuff that's going on around us. And when we do that, now we can stand on solid ground. We're rooted. And then we get the next question, though. The next question is, you have to question your assumptions. Or what are your assumptions? And there's that joke there. Assumptions, everybody got them. I'll just leave it at that. Everybody got assumptions. Don't act like you know. And when you can figure that out, that gives you more insight into the problem. You go home, you expect your mate to have done XYZ, whatever XYZ is, and it's not done, and you get just irate. Well, what were your assumptions? Were your assumptions that person was not doing anything in their life? They didn't just get home from work. They didn't just have an issue that they had to deal with. Would have been nice to have XYZ, whatever that is, but it's not always possible. And if you have an assumption that is supposed to take place and it doesn't, we get situations like we have going on today all over the planet. Someone assumes something. House burned down. I assume you cut the stove off. Well, you were cooking. Why you didn't cut it off? That's what's happening in the world right now. We got cooking going all over, and nobody's cutting the stove off. And then they come home, the house burned down, and what happened? Oh, I thought you was gonna cut the fire off. No, you were cooking. Why didn't you cut the fire off? That's what we got going on. And if we can't change that, oh boy, I'm gonna continue to pray, but I'm gonna start making some other preparations as well, because we have to be our brothers and sisters keeper. And to do that, I have to change my worldview, which makes me change my view of my brother and sister. No matter what race, creed, color, sexual orientation, none of that. If we needed blood transfusion or a heart transplant or a kidney transplant right now, nobody's gonna, the first question you ask, I guarantee, is not who is it coming from. I guarantee you that. You might say, is it a good one? Is it a healthy one? Does it match what I'm trying to get? But nobody's concerned with that other stuff because it doesn't matter. Love covers all. And that's what we have to begin to live with and work with. That's what we have to begin and work with. Now, once we've got our assumptions in check, right? We know where we're going because we know what we're becoming. We know what we're moving towards. We got our assumptions and we're questioning them. Not that I don't have it, but is it a good assumption? If I get that next slide, that fourth slide, says this. Now we must open up the door of our consciousness and expand and expand and expand and no longer think in terms of backyard lots, but in terms of the infinite nature, in the terms of the universe. So our assumptions, we got to open it, as Ernest said, we got to be open at the top on everything, not just questions, but assumptions and beliefs and values and ways of seeing the world. Because every day we're learning something new. We get more information. We need to expand what we are thinking about. There are no, well, I won't say no. I'll take that back. There are very few people who will deny travel by an airplane. Although there was a time that the only way you could travel was by foot. Then it went to all kinds of things, right? But I had to be open. I have a relative, try to get him to fly on a plane. And that person told me, she said, I flew on a plane once. I had the experience. That's good enough. I don't need to fly on a plane no more. Now, there's some assumptions there, right? On both sides, whatever they are. But if you're open at the top, you have to try it. And then you make a decision. I don't want to do it no more or not. But understand when you make that decision, there's some consequences that come along with that decision. If you don't catch the plane to take this 2.5-hour flight, you can drive by car and take 2 days, maybe. Either one will get you there. There's no right or wrong. It's just a choice. And so when we begin to look at changing our worldview, we have a choice. What choice do we have? A choice of what kind of world we want to live in. We have a choice of how active we want to be in that world. And when we figure that out, the worldview will change automatically. Guarantee you. Because you're going to look around and be in situations and doing things that are not healthy or not growth inspiring or not making you feel joy. And you're going to say, I'm going to move out of this view and into another view. And now once we got the assumptions and all that together, this is the hard one for a lot of us. This third one. That is to engage in dialogue. Engage in dialogue. That means you got to talk to your neighbor. You got to talk to the coworker that makes you want to just throw up every time you see them because they're so bossy or they're so passive aggressive or they're so this or they're so that, right? Let's get that next slide. Oliver Wendell Holmes said this: a mind that is stretched by a new experience can never go back to its old dimensions. And when we have dialogue, that's what happens. Because we're going to get contrasting ideas, and somebody's not going to like what we say. And we're going to tell them we believe in this, and they're going to say that's stupid. And right away, something's going to change, right? We have to begin to look at how we interact with everyone. And we want to put ourselves in situations where someone is going to test our belief. Because if I'm they used to say, and they still do, if you are into sports and you play tennis, let's say, every once in a while, you want to play somebody in tennis that's better than you. Because if you keep playing people that are lesser than you, you're going to always win. And you're going to get an inflated image of who you are as a tennis player. And then you're going to run across a buzzsaw that's going to just wear you out. And you're going to be like, oh, I thought I was a tennis player. Maybe I need to go to pickleball. I don't know. This tennis ain't working out too good for me. But that's what happens when you engage in dialogue. It's not just verbal dialogue. It's physical dialogue. It's interactions. It's exchanging ideas, working together about things that we may see life differently on. So We have to expose ourselves to that. You know, back in the day, as they say, the coffee shops were the place to go and do that, right? You could go to a coffee shop and you could strike up conversations, and they had book readings and poetries and all these different ways for people to engage and exchange ideas and get the viewpoint of the world from someone else's eyes. And that's what we need to go back to today. Some book clubs, go to lectures, go to movies, and then have conversations about the movies afterwards. Because if we just put this thing in autopilot and just stay in our lane, you know, everybody says, oh, I'm going to stay in my lane. Well, yeah, that's good too. We don't want to have a whole lot of accidents, but sometimes you need to change lanes. Or you're going to have an accident because something's in that lane and you need to get out of it. So we have to begin to look at life for real, not just you know, a Harlequin love story. Those are nice, but they're not a real world view. There may be glimpses in there, but when you look at the world in totality, it is an ever-changing, ever-moving, complex thing that we have to negotiate every moment of the day. Every moment of the day. It's like if you were riding a bike, it looks like you are going in a straight line. But in reality, as you know, when you're riding it, you're making micro movements every second to keep that bike not only straight, but upright. So you're making micro adjustments. And that's what's happening in the world. You may not see them. Somebody watching you may not see it. Just like if I see somebody riding a bike, I don't see them make the micro moves. But they are making them every second to stay balanced, to stay upright, to stay moving forward. And that's what we need to do if we're going to navigate this thing called life, and especially now. So changing our worldviews is imperative. So yes, bring up that call to action, because that's where we are now. So for this week, as we try to embody this idea, the first thing we want to do is find a place to serve. Your skills, your passion, your heart, your talents are needed. Go read to kids in the kindergarten class. Go read to elders in the assisted living facility. Go to a food bank and serve dinner. Not only will you be of service, you will get a different worldview. Parents, you know, talk about teachers until they have to go and substitute in the teacher's class to do reading to the kids, and they say, teacher, I love you. I'm going to get you something real good at the end of the school season, because this is God's work that you're doing right here. But when we go and serve and we go and work in other places, we find that out. The second thing is spend some time this week identifying your, well, I didn't write that right there. So spend some time this week identifying your current worldview, what beliefs and values and assumptions you have. Write it down and then challenge what you write. Write it down, see what it is, and then challenge what you got down there. See if it still serves you. These values and assumptions that you have about life, are they really serving me right now? Are they really serving the world right now? And if they're not, then let's make ways to change them. Because first we got to identify them. But once we do, if we really want to change, then we have to work out schemes and processes and all kinds of things to help us change that view. And so in closing, I want to read this. In this journey of challenging our worldviews, we must remain anchored in the values of love, respect, and humility. Let us treat each other with kindness and understand, recognizing that each individual is on their own path of spiritual and personal growth. As we navigate through the uncertainties and complexities of life, may we find solace in the unity of a shared humanity, a shared community, and the unyielding strength of our faith in God. Let us pray. And so as we just go within and allow our mind to relax and our heart to expand so that we become a container of love, that we realize that we've always been a container of love, and that as we look from the light and the eyes of love, we see the world differently. We see ourselves differently. We work differently. Because as we continue to refine what it means to be a person of light, a person of love, a person that is connected to the divine intelligence of the entire universe, we begin to see and find our place. We begin to know that with God, there's nothing that can't be done. And so we lean into that idea of service, of change, of transformation, of looking at life in a way that is expansive and supportive and loving. And I know that that is not only true for me, but it's true for everyone here and for anyone that's online, and that we are giving way to this idea of be ye transformed by the changing of your mind. Because we understand that as we change, the world changes. We see the world as we see ourselves. And so when we change ourselves, the world will change. And so we are changing the way we look at life. We're changing the questions we're asked. We're changing the responses we give. We're changing the way we serve so that we begin to be the ones that we are looking for. And so I know this to be true not only here, but all over this globe. And that we know in the places and that there are troubles and people are losing their lives, whether it's in the Middle East or in the Ukraine or here in America or in Africa or wherever it is. We know that change is coming and we are a part of that change. And so we just give thanks for the opportunity to be able to contribute to a changing, to a world that works for all. To be able to share our talents and our gifts and our joy and our smiles with everyone that crosses our path. And it is in that thanksgiving, it is in that joyous smile that I release this prayer into a law that is already activated, already moving, and already changing our lives. And with that, I just release, I let go, and I know that this prayer is absolutely so, and so it is. Amen.